Okay, so Declaration of Independence. So as you go through this, and we go through these notes, do not write every word down. Okay? If there's a bolded word, like mercantilism, okay, and Navigation Act, I would write those words down. You'll probably see those again on the test. The stuff in the middle is information. Okay? I'll talk about that. So if you need to know what mercantilism is, like government control of all trade, probably be a good thing to put in there. You don't necessarily need to put it in there, but if you want to, that's fine. Much like last year, as I put a slide up, I know I'm talking right now, but I'm not really saying anything important. As I put a slide up, I'm going to give you about a minute to read through it, write down things that you think are important, then we'll talk about it. So last year in U.S. history, after the Civil War, we talked about the South and how they were rebuilding after the Civil War. And one of the concepts that I talked to you guys about was sharecropping. Sharecropping was you would work for a farmer and he would give you land, but you had to buy all your seed from him and you had to buy all your supplies from him, and then you'd sell your grain, cotton, tobacco, whatever you were growing, back to that farmer, and he would take it to market. That's basically what mercantilism is. Okay? The United States, from 1500 to 1800, was split up amongst about 4 or 5 different countries. England had the 13 colonies, France had some of Canada, some of Louisiana, everything west of the Mississippi River. They had a bunch of land. Spain had Florida and some areas down there. Mexico had all the places like California and Utah and New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. So the United States was split up into a whole bunch of different territories with realistically the majority of the people living in those 13 colonies. So the way it worked was, since England was in control of the majority of the population, that was the only person you could do business with, for the most part. Pretty good deal for England. Okay? You would grow stuff, whatever you grew, cotton, timber, tobacco, whatever you grew, England would take it, and whatever you needed to buy to grow those things, England would sell it to you. So, you wanted to plant cotton. You're a farmer, you want to plant some cotton. Great, plant the cotton. How are you going to harvest that cotton if you don't have the right workers, materials? Well, you got to buy from England. Okay? So they get to dictate how much they're going to sell you their products for. Okay? What do you need? You need a new couch? Got to buy from England. Okay? How much is it going to cost? Whatever they want to charge you. Because you don't have any other options. Okay? So, you got this beautiful crop, bumper crop of cotton. You got cotton coming out of your ears. What are you going to do with it? You got to sell it to England. What are they going to pay? Whatever they feel like paying. Because who else are you going to sell it to? Nobody. You don't have an option. Not only that, let's say right now we got 2 countries in here. We got, since your last name is German, we'll go Germany and Vistopia. It's an ideal land, Vistopia. A lot of good things going on there. Okay, so right now, we got Germany over here, and he controls the 13 colonies. And he also decides if I can trade with Vistopia or not. He gets to decide. I don't get to decide. So right now, I'm selling cotton to you for $1 a bundle. Okay? Well, Vistopia would like to pay me $2 a bundle. And you get to decide whether or not I get to sell my cotton to him. And now, the thing about it is, Dystopia and Germany, they fight all the time. Because they all want the land, they all want the money, they all want the power. So, if you two are fighting, then you might let me sell a little bit to him. But as soon as you two start fighting, well, you're not gonna let me sell him things that you can use to fight war against him. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, if you two start fighting and I start selling him guns to kill you, well, that's just bad business. It's not very smart. So that's what was happening in the United States at that time. England and France were fighting a lot because they wanted to control the world. So sometimes I got to trade with France. Sometimes I didn't get to trade with France. Just kind of depended on if they were currently fighting at that time. Okay? That's what the Navigation Act is. Navigation Act is me, as the controller, the King of England, telling you, as the colonies, who you can or cannot trade with. Okay? Now, the thing that you need to know about here is you need to know about the French and Indian War, and England wanted the colonies to pay for it. So as you read all that stuff, okay, after England won the French and Indian War, King George demanded control of the colonies. King George and Parliament felt the colonists should bear some of the costs. Parliament passed several new laws to shift the cost to the Americans. Okay? That's the main point of that slide. All right, so England and France were fighting all the time. And they were fighting for control over this, that, and the other thing. As they were fighting, the British sent troops over to America, and there was also a whole bunch of colony residents that were also fighting on the side of the English. Okay? The state of Virginia didn't declare war on France. The state of Virginia had nothing to gain by the war on France. The reason it's called the French and Indian War is because the French convinced the Native Americans to join on their side, saying that if we won, you'd get a whole bunch of land. Okay? The English fought against the French because the English wanted some of the French territory. Colonies didn't expand, colonies didn't get rich. King of England got rich if they won. King of England started to fight. So, Germany attacks Vistopia. And I'm a resident of Germany. I don't got nothing against Vistopia. I just sell them cotton for $2 a bundle. Pays me better than you do. Why am I mad at him? I'm not mad at him. I like him. He gives me money. Oh, I gotta fight him? Okay, well, I guess I gotta fight him. So, Germany attacks Vistopia, and we win. Yay, Germany! And then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, we got all these bills. John German, King of Germany, does not want to pay those bills. Why don't you pay those bills? Well, I don't want to pay those bills. I don't get anything. I didn't make any money out of this war. I didn't expand my territory. I didn't get a whole bunch of new raw materials that I can make you sell to me at whatever price I say. I didn't get a whole bunch of new products that I got to sell to you. You need a saw to cut down that tree? Well, here's a saw. I'll sell it to you. I got nothing out of the deal, except for shot at by Vistopia. A little bit disappointed in me for shooting at me. So, that's why the colonists were mad. King of England decided, hey, we're going to war. And then they won the war. And they said, oh, you're paying for the war. Even though I didn't get any advantages from winning the war. Okay, so the King of England and Parliament passed all these laws to make sure that the colonies paid for the French and Indian War. The first one they passed was called the Stamp Act. Anything that was printed at that time, there had to be placed a stamp on it to show that tax had been paid. Printing at this time, between books and newspapers and newsletters and all those things, were a vital part of information in the colonies. Think of it this way. The Stamp Act is basically every time you open Google to see what was going on, you would pay $1 for it. That's the equivalent, that's today's equivalent of what the Stamp Act is. You want to keep your snap streak alive? $1. You got to check your Insta posts? That's $1. Email? Well, that's $1. So that's basically what the Stamp Act is. England also decided that they weren't going to allow anybody else to supply the colonies with tea. Again, it goes back to making money. So the main tea supplier for the colonies was something called the English Trading Company. The English Trading Company was responsible for taking tea all over the world to all of the British lands. They started taxing tea. So now you're taxing my news, now you're taxing my tea. And I know that it's not that big a deal. You might think, well, it's tea. Nobody drinks tea. All those 13 colonies, the majority of those people came from England. And the English like their tea. They have specific meals twice a day that just, they drink tea and eat finger sandwiches. The other thing that the colonists were upset about was the fact that they're getting taxed and they don't have a say in it. So they wanted members of parliament. They wanted each colony to have its own representative in the British government to decide, hey, should we be getting taxed? Should we not be getting taxed? How much should we be getting taxed? Do we have a say in any of this? As of right now, it's much like if you try to have a conversation with your parents and they pull up the because I said so. We can't really argue with because I said so. You could try to argue with because I said so. But because I said so is pretty much the argument ender. Because that says, hey, no matter what you say, I don't care. Because this is the way it is. All right? So, the Stamp Act was repealed in 1766, but it was in place for a while, and basically, it just made everybody mad. And tensions were rising, and it's one of those deals where they got angrier and angrier at each other. And then in 1770, the Boston Massacre happened. So the thing that you need to know about the Boston Massacre is Crispus Attucks was the first person to die. Boston Massacre, British soldiers were standing out in front of the courthouse. Somebody threw a rock at them, and they said, "Oh, you got a rock? Well, I got a gun." Guess who wins that battle? Dude with the gun.
Rock.
Sometimes. But, tell you this much, I'd feel better if I had a gun in my hand. Interesting fact about the Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre happened. It wasn't a massacre. There was like a couple people got hurt and a dude died. Not a massacre. Okay? But the one thing that's interesting about it is the second president of the United States defended Cleveland. Who knows who the second president of the United States is? Anyone? Who? Say it aloud.
Adams.
Adams, John Adams, thank you.
I said that.
Whew. I can see right now we got some work to do. Okay, so John Adams, second president of the United States, actually defended the British soldiers. The British soldiers were brought up on murder charges. John Adams, who became our second president of the United States, defended the British for their right to defend themselves. So because they threw rocks at them and sticks and were threatening them, the judge, also British, said, yeah, you were in the right to shoot a guy for throwing a rock at you. Now, don't think that same defense would work right now, you know, just in case you want to try that. This will be the last one for today.
Yes. So as we go through some of this stuff, we're not gonna go into a great amount of detail in a lot of these things we talk about. Because we're not here to learn about what happened in the Boston Tea Party. We're here to learn what the Boston Tea Party and the Intolerable Acts led to, which was the Declaration of Independence. So the main colony of the 13 colonies that was causing the English so much problems was Massachusetts. You had the Boston Massacre, you had the Boston Tea Party. If you go to Boston right now, there's still kind of an issue. A lot of things. But that spirit of rebelling against authority has carried over for generations in Boston. Boston Tea Party, you've probably all learned, well, I'm not going to assume that anymore, considering all the worried looks I got with the second president of the United States. But Boston Tea Party, I'm hoping that you've learned something about it. Group of colonists painted their faces black, dressed up as Native Americans, snuck onto the docks, snuck onto the British trading company's ships, threw the tea into the harbor. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament passed the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts are a series of laws to punish the people of Massachusetts. How did it punish it? So they took all the power, well, they tried to take all the power away from the colonial legislature. So every colony had its own form of government. We'll talk more about that in detail when we talk about the Articles of Confederation. The other thing it did is required you to quarter. Quarter means you got a house British soldiers. So if a British soldier came over, knocked on your door, said, hey, I'd like a sandwich and a place to sleep. You had to get him a sandwich and a place to sleep. And it closed off the port of Boston. So Boston at that time was one of the biggest cities, if not the biggest city in the colonies. It's where all the trade happened. Everybody would come into Boston. They'd come into the harbor. It's where you would ship your goods out. It's where you would purchase your things to sell. It was the main hub of industry at that time. So in response to the Intolerable Acts, the First Continental Congress was formed. And that's what we'll start talking about on Monday, and how the Declaration of Independence was formed. So,
French and Indian War, you guys are gonna pay for it. You're gonna pay for it by Stamp Act and T-Tax. We threw all the tea into the harbor. We're going to increase your penalties. We're going to declare our freedom.